So this was a pretty good chapter, one of the better ones that we've gotten lately for sure. And in it, we're seeing the future versions of Class 1A, but most prominently Izuku, Bakugo, and Shoto. And it's pretty fascinating. So Endeavor's like still in goblin mode in this chapter, and he's like beating down All for One, and he starts going into this monologue. And he says, "The past is immutable. My wrath, my resentment, and even my retribution woven together, they form the fabric of the future. What is that future? It's a path for the youth to tread on. It's the endless possibilities. It's why I must prevail so that the sins of us adults don't become an insurmountable obstacle in the way of the youth." And as he says this, we see the future of Class 1A. Now, does this mean that this is like literally them in the future, like their adult versions? Or is this just some kind of vision that Endeavor is seeing as he's saying this? No way to know for sure. But nonetheless, I'm pretty sure Horikoshi is showing us this for a reason, because it's possible that since this is the final arc, we may never see this fully. I mean, it's possible that either the final chapter or a couple panels in it might fast forward to the future and we'll get some glimpses of it, but for now this is maybe the most that we'll ever see of what the perceived future could be. But anyway, the adult version of Shoto more or less kind of looks, you know, the same. I mean, he's taller, as all of them are, I mean, naturally, and his gear seems to have altered somewhat. I mean, it's definitely an improvement on his existing set, but no real radical changes here. However, his hair is shorter, so that's different. And as for Bakugo, he pretty much looks the same. Maybe his gauntlets have improved. I mean, I'm sure the technology has, but aesthetically, they haven't really altered too much. And as for Izuku, he hasn't really changed all that much either. And also, we're not getting like a full-on look at them. I mean, this panel isn't even like fully articulated, and I'm sure this was, you know, purposely done by Horikoshi. But Izuku's suit looks, you know, more or less kind of like the same what he's rocking right now. Hey, also guys, if you like my Hero content, please subscribe if you haven't already. It's fine if you don't want to, but if you just needed a reminder, here you go. The big change here, of course, is his cape. It looks like he has sewn on another cape onto his existing tattered Gran Torino cape, possibly. And that makes me think, like, I guess this is like a genuine glimpse into the future, because like, why would Endeavor be envisioning that little detail that he would otherwise have no idea that would happen? And of course, there's the possibility that Endeavor himself isn't even seeing this, and this is just purely for the audience, meaning that this is maybe a glimpse into the future. And also that begs the question of, is this guaranteed? Like, is this for sure going to happen? And does that mean that everyone that we see here is going to live, namely Izuku? And again, no way to know for sure. I'm not saying that it's guaranteed that Izuku is going to die at the end, not even close, but I also think on the other hand, it's not guaranteed that he's going to live. Personally, I think there's like a somewhat of a good possibility of him ultimately sacrificing himself for the greater good. But also, you know, he probably will live too. And I'm sure this will bring many of you back to the first chapter, where we get that narration from Izuku at the end of it, where he's basically saying that this is the story of how I became the greatest hero ever. And I don't know if that's necessarily accurate, to be honest. I guess it ultimately comes down to how you translate it, but in the official Viz translation, Izuku says, I forgot to mention this, but this is the story of how I became a great hero. That's it. Just a great hero, not the greatest. Now, I'm not taking that too literally. I'm sure Izuku will become the greatest hero by the end of the story, not only just on accomplishments, but power too. I'm sure once it's all said and done, he's pretty much going to be the quirk god. But are we seeing the great hero Izuku here, or the greatest? Maybe, maybe not. Regardless, a lot of questions stem from this, but still, I think it's pretty interesting nonetheless. But anyway, let's go back to Endeavor going goblin mode on All for One. So he's like beating him down, like literally dragging him through the dirt here. And All for One tries to steal his quirk. I know, like, finally, this is like All for One's thing, and he hardly ever tries to do it. But Endeavor shoots like fire beams from his eyes and burns his hand. This is awesome. We've never seen Endeavor do this before. Then he winds up hitting him point blank with a prominence burn, holding on to him, just like how he did to Shigaraki in the previous war. Except this time it actually seems to be successful because he burns All For One to like charcoal. I mean, he got pretty close with Shigaraki last time, but like at the last second, All For One took over his consciousness and was able to turn the fight around. And this time around, it seems like he's won, but of course he hasn't, because, you know, it's All For One and it's never that simple. So after he burns him to charcoal, All For One starts talking again, and he says, "Did you really believe that I would step on a stage without some aces up my sleeve? You should know by now that this body is well past its expiration date, and I have no other uses for it anymore. That's why there's a little something I'd like to try." And then we see Eri with the quirk destroying bullets around her. Then the burnt up All For One starts to like grow back his ear and his eye. And he says, "What made you think that heroes were the only ones prepared to risk their lives?" This is pretty crazy, right? So first of all, obviously All For One didn't have his ear and his eye. He just kind of had like a potato face with a mouth before, courtesy of the beatdown from All Might. But now that they're growing back, along with us seeing Eri and the quirk destroying bullets in the previous panel, I think we can kind of put two and two together here and see what's going on. So we know that Shigaraki stole the quirk destroying bullets from Overhaul way back when at the end of that arc, and he eventually wound up giving them to Yujiko. But we never really saw what Yujiko did with them. I mean, we did see Shigaraki wind up using the quirk destroying bullets afterwards, but he kind of just wound up traditionally using them as like projectiles. But the other little interesting aspect of this panel is that the needles that are normally on top of the bullets are like gone, and I think that's signifying that they have been used here, meaning that Yujiko has likely reverse engineered them possibly. And this isn't too hard to grasp, because if Overhaul was able to make these bullets in the first place, you know, running his basement experiments on Eri, then you give this to like the one above all scientists in this world in Yujiko, then he could easily reverse engineer this and extract possibly a variation of her quirk itself from them, which I guess he's doing here. Now, I don't think this means that All For One like literally has like the rewind quirk and everybody's screwed, but he seems to have like some kind of variation of it at least, because his eyes and his ears are coming back, clearly stating that this is more than just super regeneration. But it's also possible that this quirk or whatever Yujiko has done here is not completely stable, because he says there's a little something that I'd like to try. So maybe there was like some kind of contingency to it as to where like if it would only activate or be able to work if All For One was at death's door or something, and maybe otherwise it wouldn't be worth using it. Now it appears to be successful, and he's completely healing himself via the properties of rewind, and we might finally see like All For One's full face in the next chapter, something that we haven't seen yet. Whenever we got flashbacks of him, his face was always obstructed by shadows somewhat. We never got a full-on look at him. Now, is there a greater reason for that? Maybe, maybe not. Does it mean that he's going to look like Izuku? I don't know. But I just hope that we fully see his face, and I just hope that there's some significance to it. It just turns out that it wasn't an aesthetic choice that Horikoshi chose for him, just to represent that he is the personification of evil this whole time. Although, you know, if it is, it's whatever. But anyway, coming to the ending sequence of this chapter, we see Izuku, who we haven't seen in a while, still flying to UA, trying to reunite with that group fighting against Shigaraki. And suddenly the vestige of Yoichi manifests, and it says, "Midoriya, I have a bad feeling about this." He's like, "What's going on?" And then in the distance, we see like these objects coming at Izuku, and it says a mysterious threat draws near. And that's where the chapter ends. So no way to be able to make out what these things are. They're literally just specks at this point because they're so far away. But considering that it's saying a threat draws near and Yoichi has a bad feeling about this, I guess it's not friendly, but it could be like a misdirect, and maybe these are like the fighter jets that used to accompany Star and Stripe, and they're gonna come help Izuku maybe. But if it isn't, and it's just as it says, a mysterious threat draws near, then I guess these are possibly new high-end Nomus maybe, or new villains. Not really sure. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, guys, and if you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you next one.